Welcome back to the Literacy Lab. I'm Mr. Amato, and I think today's lesson is going to be a blast. But that's just one man's opinion. Let's get another perspective here from Miss Montgomery.
I have to say, Mr. Amato, from where I'm sitting, I think this is going to be a very informative lesson.
Okay, well, it's nice to gain more perspective. In fact, that's what we'll be discussing today. This lesson is all about point of view, perspective, and bias. 3 terms that highlight how the lens of the story shapes everything we read.
That's right. When analyzing a story, it's important to consider more than the plot and information. Just as important as what is happening in the story is who is telling us the story.
You know I love investigating the author's intent, but I guess now it's time to take a look at the author themselves.
Exactly.
So why don't you start us off maybe with point of view?
Point of view is the angle or position from which a story is told. It determines who is telling the story and what information the reader is allowed to know.
That's great. Now can I point out what it's not?
Please.
POV. You're teaching a lesson about literacy.
Yes, this social media trend is very confusing because it's rarely used properly. And look, I get it. It's a trend in a reel. It doesn't have to make perfect literary sense, but just don't let it confuse you about what point of view actually means.
So a more realistic version would be something like, POV, you're hosting a literacy lesson.
Yes, that is actually point of view. You are telling us a story, and the audience is seeing the world from your unique vantage point.
Okay, I guess I'll put the phone away. Anything else we need to cover on point of view?
There is. There are 3 primary types you'll want to know. The first is first-person narrative. This is where the narrator is a character in the story. In this case, you hear directly from the author. For example, I woke up in my bed and remembered I was all alone.
Next up, we have second-person narrative. This is where the narrator speaks directly to the reader using you. For example, you wake up in a strange bed. You look around the room and discover that you are all alone. This point of view is less common in literature, but used in instances like a choose-your-own-adventure book.
And lastly, we have third-person narrative. This is where the narrator is outside of the story, using he, she, or they. For example, Kara woke up in her bed, she looked around the room and realized that she was all alone.
Okay, so point of view kind of serves as a camera angle for the narrative. It shows us where we're standing in the story. How is that different than perspective?
Well, if the point of view is the camera, then the perspective is the filter on the lens. Perspective refers to a character's unique way of seeing the world and understanding events within the story. It can be influenced and thus reveal the speaker's background, experiences, personality, beliefs, and attitudes.
So, 2 people can see the same event from the same location, but their perspectives and how they describe it could be totally different.
Right. In this scenario, the person on the left may describe the dog as aggressive, whereas the person on the right may describe the person as provoking. They have the same point of view on the scene, but their perspective is different. From this example, we could gather that the speaker on the left may be more afraid of dogs, whereas the person on the right may be more of a dog lover.
Perspective determines how they interpret what's happening.
Exactly. And that brings us to bias. Bias is when a speaker's perspective shows a clear preference or prejudice. Bias isn't always obvious, but it's important to recognize because it can distort the truth of a story or leave out voices entirely.
Now in literature, this plays out in some really powerful ways. So to prove it, let's jump into the analysis part.
Today's excerpt comes from J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, first published in 1951. It was one of the worst schools I ever went to. It was full of phonies and mean guys. You never saw so many mean guys in your life. For instance, they had this headmaster, Mr. Haas. That was the phoniest bastard I ever met in my life.
Can we even say that word?
Hey, it was in the novel.
All right. Well, right away, I guess we can pick up point of view. Worst schools I ever went to and I ever met in my life. This narrator is speaking from a first-person point of view. We are right inside of his head.
That's right. Of course, the second line is worth mentioning too. You never saw so many mean guys in your life. If you aren't paying attention, you may say, oh, they used you. That must mean second person.
Right, but the character is using that as a figure of speech. It's clear that the narrative is happening directly to the speaker.
Now let's talk about perspective. I'd say it's pretty clear this speaker has a specific view on the world.
Worse schools, phonies, mean guys. This character is cynical and judgmental.
Yes, and notice how he uses "in your life" twice. He's hyperbolic in his dismissal of others. We learn a lot about this character by the way he describes the world around him.
Yes, he seems distrustful and quite honestly hurt. As for bias, he calls out the headmaster by name and is dismissive of entire groups of people at once. We would say he displays a bias against authority and the status quo.
What's great about the book is that it shows how a narrator's limited perspective can still offer a deep insight if you know what to look for.
Right. And now before we wrap up, we do want to point out that while it's important to pay attention to whose point of view we're hearing, it can be just as important to ask whose point of view are we not hearing.
That's right. And this goes way beyond novels. I mean, this shows up in history books, news articles, and even social media. Always pay attention to where the story is coming from and how it can reveal perspective.
So, in your analysis, you should be looking for who is telling the story, what is their background, and how might their experience shape the story. And finally, are there any perspectives that we may even be missing?
That's right. And in your writing, you can use this awareness to strengthen your arguments. If you understand perspective and bias, you can make your message clear and credible.
To summarize, point of view is who is telling the story. Perspective is how they interpret what they're seeing, shaped by their identity and their background. And bias is when the perspective shows preference, often unfair.
When you can spot these elements, you become a stronger reader, thinker, and communicator.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us today in the Literacy Lounge. And as always, congratulations.
You just got smarter.